Next week is NFL Draft Week, which means it's time for our final mock draft simulator on Mock Draft Monday here on the Locked On Bengals podcast.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. I'm your host, Jake Liscow. He's your host, James Rapien. Together, we are the Locked On Bengals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, coming to you every day with all the latest Bengals news, analysis, and more. We've got a big week planned, Mock Draft Monday today. We've got Dane Brugler joining us tomorrow. We've got Joe Gibber. We've got Mike Santagata. We're loading up on guests as we get to the NFL draft. If you missed it last week, by the way, make sure you go check out the two-part interview with Brian Callahan. And hey, we're on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcast, free and available on all those places. So make sure you subscribe, hit that follow button, and get us delivered to your eyes and ears when we drop our episodes every day. And today's episode brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline is where the game starts. And James, without further ado, shall we dive into the scenario that I said before we started recording? I've been waiting for this conversation that feels realistic to me, right, in the first round for weeks. And we've run the first round simulator here. The Bengals on the clock at 31. The top guys that jump out to me right away, visible on the screen if you're watching on YouTube: Kaiir Elam, corner out of Florida; Kenyon Green from Texas A&M; Tyler Linderbaum from Iowa; Arnold Abacadi from Penn State; and Devontae Wyatt from Georgia. All available. All guys that the Bengals, I'm sure, would be glad to see available at 31.
No doubt. Tempting. And it's going to be fun to talk about those guys. By the way, we did take some heat last week when we picked Jaquan Brisker. Well, he went off the board at 24. So, hey, haters, he wasn't even available and isn't available right now as we're on the clock. Other names worth noting: Andrew Booth went 23rd to the Cardinals. Jamison Williams fell. We almost had to have a debate, fell to the Chiefs at 30, which is Kansas City's dream scenario. But outside of that, Daxton Hill, by the way, 19th overall for those in our first mock draft simulator. So we went back-to-back safeties. Certainly not going safety here. Look, this is great because you're going to have Lou Anarumo and Brian Callahan and Frank Pollock and Marion Hobby and these guys battling it out in the war room for their guy, for who they want. And, Kenyon Green, Kaiir Elam, Devontae Wyatt, Tyler Linderbaum. Those to me are the four. If I had to give a big four available, Abacadi, I think certainly in the conversation, depending on the scenario. But to me, those are the four if I had to hone in on that I'd be having a real challenge here. And trading down is scary. But if you have four guys on the board you like and you're moving to, say, 37, I think there's a chance they would at least consider it. But you could miss out on one of these premier prospects. So we didn't trade down. We're staying put at 31. And those are the four. So 2 defensive players, 2 offensive linemen.
We also didn't get an offer that would take us into the high 30s. The offers that we got were to take us into the 40s. And I think that's realistic to imagine that teams that are trying to come back up into the first round might not be teams picking at the very top of the second round. So when you're considering the trade back option here and you're screaming at us, trade back, get another pick, and then get whichever one of these guys falls, it doesn't always work that way. It takes 2 to tango, all those cliches. James, I can tell you, I agree with your 4 guys here at the top of the list. Arnold Abacadi would be the 5th guy for sure. I agree with that. I think that he has some really good productivity. He stayed an extra year. He's a little bit older coming out of Penn State. To me, the get off is really inconsistent with him as well. I've actually watched a couple of games of him a couple of days ago, which is why he's fresh in my head. But the athleticism sometimes shows up, and the bend sometimes shows up in a big way. Has a great swipe move, but I agree that from a value perspective, I'm looking at one of these other guys. And for me, the one that's hard to pass on is Kenyon Green. And so this is where I think the Bengals picking between Kenyon Green and Kaiir Elam. And
Mhm.
I don't know how they would feel about Devontae Wyatt because of his age, but looks like a rare prospect in some ways. I would probably wager that the Bengals would be between Kaiir Elam and Kenyon Green here, and I think they would lean Elam. I think I lean Kenyon Green.
I certainly do. And it's crazy. You look at these different simulators, and we're using Pro Football Network this week, but Pro Football Focus, Kenyon Green's just hanging out there. Oh, in most mocks, because he's like their 42nd player on the board. And I still don't think he's going to be there. If he is there, I'm taking him. And if I had to rank these guys, it probably is Kenyon Green 1, Tyler Linderbaum 2, Kaiir Elam 3, Devontae Wyatt 4, Abacadi 5, which we've talked about. And I also agree with you that I could see the Bengals being really intrigued by Kaiir Elam if he's there. But to me, I default to, all right, what guy is going to make the instant impact, but is going to help the Bengals win the most this year? And I think that part of it is part of it. I think it's Kenyon Green. I think they have to get some young offensive linemen here, and a guy who could have went in the top 20 is still there at 31. Makes a ton of sense. Historically, I know they paid Alex Kappa, by the way, but they don't pay guard anyways. Jackson Carman has some red flags. Push him some, and not only push him, make him earn whatever role he has in 2022 and beyond. You do that with Kenyon Green, who I think would be a plug and play type guy. You don't have to move Ted Karras, who they're really comfortable with at that center position, so he gets the edge over Linderbaum. I'm taking Kenyon Green here if it's me. But Kaiir Elam, like if they took Kaiir Elam, I'm not knocking them for it. I totally understand it. And that is the beauty of this mock versus past mocks that we've done in simulators. There are multiple guys on the board that have fallen to the Bengals. And I do think that there's a scenario where Linderbaum's still on the board, Kenyon Green's still on the board, one of these corners is still on the board. And if that happens, I think the Bengals are going to be smiling and they're going to get a guy that can come in right away and contribute. Let me ask you this. Between Green and Elam, who do you think is more likely to start from the jump and make an impact? Because that matters to me. And I think it should matter to the Bengals if they're in win now mode in this really crazy AFC. Who do you think is more in line to do that?
In my head, Kenyon Green steps in as a starting left guard, or I guess he would be a left guard for the Bengals right away. And Kaiir Elam, I'm not sure if he's starting right away, or if he's starting
Yeah.
4, 5, 6 games into the season. If there's a camp injury, I think he's starting pretty quickly. Like he's not. It's not that he's not ready to step in and start. It's just are the Bengals more comfortable with Eli Apple off the bat,
Yep.
off the jump, and what I hear people screaming at us about more than not trading back here, James, is just pick Linderbaum. What are you guys doing? He tested well. He tested. He's really athletic, and I just think that the size concern hasn't gone away. And I do like Linderbaum a lot, but the thing that Green kind of gives you that Linderbaum doesn't. I know Green didn't test well, but he's more athletic on tape than he tested,
Mhm.
and he has positional versatility that they're gonna like,
Yep.
and he should be a really good guard. He doesn't have the size questions. I think that does matter. So I think we're in agreement here, James. Kenyon Green. But if you're screaming at us in your car, watching on YouTube, whatever you're doing, to pick one of these other guys, I hear your argument. We haven't even talked about Devontae Wyatt, who fills an immediate need for the
Yep.
Bengals as a pass rusher, as a defensive tackle who would play in a heavy rotation early in his career. But to me, Kenyon Green, positional flexibility, and should be a really good player. And he's young.
Mhm.
I mean, all these guys are young, actually, except Devontae Wyatt and Arnold Abacadi. The first three guys that we talked about, though, young players, room to grow. Let's go Kenyon Green, James.
Yep. And I would rank him Green, Linderbaum, Elam, Wyatt, Ebikadi, if I had to rank them. And so it just happens that it goes in age order. So yeah, let's take Kenyon Green and on to the second round we go. We'll dive into the second round coming up next. But I have to tell you about BetOnline, your one-stop shop for all things sports wagering, whether you're looking for stats, sports info, and so much more. The NBA playoffs are here. And maybe you think that the Milwaukee Bucks are going to go back to back, or the Phoenix Suns and Chris Paul and company are going to make another run at not only the Western Conference title, but an NBA title. You can wager on that and so much more in one spot. BetOnline, plus the NFL draft less than 2 weeks away. They have all the props you could imagine. So check them out right now at BetOnline. I've used them. You should too, from individual player props to where guys could go to, even the 2022 NFL season. BetOnline, where the game starts.
James, we're back into the second round here. And let's take a look at where things fall. Obviously, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see these trade offers. This Cleveland trade offer, again, very tempting. This is the second time Cleveland has offered us two pretty nice picks to move back. For the purposes of today, we're not going to do so. And James, wide receivers aplenty
Yeah.
available
Whew.
here. And I know that you like
Whew.
Alec Pierce, but if you're
Oh,
telling me that Jahan Dotson is
that's the one that
available in
got
the second
me.
round,
Whew.
oh
Whew.
my God. I mean, that's
Oh
a guy
my
that could be
God.
gone in the first. But let's review, if we could, before we
Yeah.
get too excited about these wide receivers,
Whew.
who's been drafted here in the second round and where they were
Linderbaum
drafted.
falling to 51. Wow. That's crazy. Kyler Gordon, 48. Trey McBride off the board first out of all those guys at 47. Abacadi fell to the Browns at 44. Good value there. My guy Desmond Ridder to the Colts. Perry and Winfrey, we took him in the second round last week, went off the board at 39. He's higher in this simulator on the board than the one we used last week for what it's worth. Kaiir Elam didn't fall far. Travis Jones, the guy we talked about last week, didn't fall far, 34th overall. Roger McCreary at 37. Imagine the difference between Kaiir Elam and Roger McCreary, 36 and 37. I would much rather have Kaiir Elam for what it's worth. 3 corners go off the board there, though. Tariq Woolen at 38. So corners go back to back to back, and Petrie as well. He's more of a safety and can play nickel as well. But yeah, I mean, wide receiver is certainly what stands out to me. Devontae Wyatt almost made it, by the way, which is insane. And I don't think that's realistic. So I'm kind of glad that didn't happen. But the one that stands out to me, and the Chiefs, man, just loading up on weapons. Greg Dulcich goes off the board at 62. And yeah, I'm not happy about that one because he's certainly a contender for that 63rd pick, in my opinion.
There's a player that didn't get drafted that I really want to pick here, and we'll talk about it in a second. But what a draft for the Chiefs.
Yeah.
Jamison Williams and Greg Dulcich with your first and second round picks. Hey, there's the guy that I
Oh,
wanted to talk
yep.
about, Logan Hall,
Yeah. The
defensive
fact that he
tackle
made
from
it this
Houston.
far, it's like a cheat code, right? If he's still there. Whew.
He might be. I don't think that it's likely. The name right
Yeah.
beside him, by the way, Nick Bonito, had, I think, the highest pass rush win rate from Pro Football Focus of any edge rusher in this class. So here's the debate, James. And there's a number of receivers here that I don't think will be here.
Yep.
Between Jahan Dotson and even Sky Moore, George
Yeah.
Pickens, those are 3 receivers I don't think will be available at pick 63.
And Mechie
Alec
might
Pierce
not
might be,
either.
and Mechie might
Alec
not be
Pierce might
either.
be. Mechie might not be either. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, and that's the thing is the Bengals were kind of the blueprint. You got to load up on weapons, and the Chiefs were first, and even the Rams, right? They went out and they get Allen Robinson after winning the Super Bowl. Like, you can't have enough weapons. I think a lot of these guys are going to go off the board, but if they're there, you definitely have a conversation. But at the same time, if the draft plays out this way, maybe the Bengals say, well, one of the guys we like fall to 95, or well, guys that we thought were going to go in the 4th to 5th round, are they going to fall even farther at wide receiver since it's playing out this way? So you never know how the draft is going to turn out from that perspective. And to me, Logan Hall, they brought him in for a top 30 visit on Friday. Would really stand out here. If they're able to get him, he makes a ton of sense, can play interior on pass rush downs, help replace Larry Ogunjobi, gives you another edge presence, and had a good Senior Bowl. And that's something the Bengals have prioritized. So if he somehow fell to 63, and you know what? Joseph Osai fell last year, and no one was really expecting him to fall to the 60s, and he did. So it
It
would not
happens every year. You can
totally
think
shock me. Yeah.
think back to, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah
Yeah.
for the Browns, goes way into the second round. But here, to me, it's a slam dunk Logan Hall. I know these wide receivers are here. I really like Jahan Dotson. He would tempt the hell out of me. because he can play all over the place. But the fall off at defensive tackle is massive. And I really like Logan Hall much more than this simulator likes Logan Hall. Dane Brugler, by the way, Logan Hall, 37 on his board. And like you said, James, can line up all over the place.
Yeah.
Can play 3 tech, can play 5 tech, and at Houston played out on the edge as well at times. And he's kind of got that tweener build.
And yeah, so I say we go Logan Hall here. And for full disclosure, we do want to be semi-realistic, and these are simulators. So Jahan Dotson, I don't think he's going to be there. I don't think that's realistic. Logan Hall is borderline unrealistic, but we do have a precedent where guys do fall, and you never know. And I agree with you. Nick Bonito would be tempting too here, just in general, but not if Logan Hall's still on the board. That versatility certainly matters. So
really quick, can we just look at corner just to see who's available here at this point? Because this could be another scenario where we're missing on corner. Cam Taylor-Britt there and is probably the guy that would be highest on my board at corner at this point. So this is
Alante
early
Taylor's
for
a
me.
guy they met with, but it's too early. Kobe Bryant, I know a lot of people like, but I think this would be too early for him.
I see a lot of mock drafts from Bengals fans picking Kobe Bryant in the 4th round, and I'm not even terribly comfortable with that. But for me, let's go Logan Hall here, James. If you're in agreement, we can move on to the 3rd round.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Even though, some of these receivers, who knows, maybe one of them fall to pick 95, and then we can have a real debate on that. But if you could get Logan Hall, imagine this. If we look up on Friday night in between round 2 and 3 of the draft, Jake, and the Bengals have gotten Kenyon Green and Logan Hall, whoo,
the draft is already an A for me.
The trenches just got much better. And speaking of wide receiver, that there's at least one guy that's there that's interesting. And oh man, there's a couple guys that, not just receiver, but guys overall that fell. I guess we should look at some of them. You mentioned Cam Taylor-Britt. He's still on the board for what it's worth. Matthew Butler, the defensive tackle. I know the Bengals at least met with him. Cam Jurgens, who appears to be the cheat code and falls farther in drafts than he should, or that he will on draft day in these mock simulators, is still on the board. Nick Bonito. This is the one that's interesting to me. If he really fell to 95,
he might too, actually.
Would you take him? Because he jumped off the page right at me right away, and there are some receivers here that are interesting. I think Calvin Austin at this stage is interesting. You have a conversation, but to me, the guy that stands out the most is Nick Bonito.
Yeah, the fear with Bonito is, he only gets on the field to rush the passer. He's kind of a 1-2 down player early in his career, but he can help you close games. And he's a pass rusher that they need some pass rushing juice, and all he is pass rushing juice. So I would have an incredibly hard time not drafting Nick Bonito in this position. However, the other guy, Cam Taylor-Britt, that you brought up, I think there's a big fall off after Cam Taylor-Britt, and this is about an appropriate range for him. Now, you go look at what Joe Goodberry has done so far as we've started our draft grading process, and his film grades for Cam Taylor-Britt versus, Kobe Bryant and Alante Taylor aren't actually too far off, but Kobe Bryant, I think, has been picked in this scenario. And this is probably a little early for Alante Taylor, but to me, Cam Taylor-Britt checks every box. He checks the productivity box. He checks good enough athleticism box, and he's good enough on film. So that is what would make it hard. The other thing that would make it hard is this a point where you want to look at tight end? I don't think that the 3rd round feels very good for me for tight end.
Jelani Woods is still there. Just saying. He's low on this board, though, so you never know where he'll go. He could be there in round 4 or 5. I know people are high on him, but
and
I
to
don't know
me,
if NFL teams will feel the same way.
We talked with Joe about these tight ends last week, and he sees a lot of them the same way. So he has, Jelani Woods. Can you go back to the tight ends for just 1 second? Jelani Woods, Charlie Kolar, and Cole Turner are all kind of like the same film grade to him. Obviously, there's different stuff going on with athleticism and productivity, and they have different strengths and weaknesses. But that's kind of where we're at with tight end, where I'm not in a rush necessarily to pick a guy here. What else did you want to look at?
No, I was just looking at just seeing who else was still on the board, but overall, I'll be honest. If they could get Nick Bonito here, I would take him, and I would say, all right, that's why you brought back Eli Apple. Because if the draft played out this way and you're getting, BPA and you're adding guys like this, you get Logan Hall in round 2 and it just breaks your way, you can roll with it and you don't feel super desperate to not that it would be a reach on Cam Taylor-Britt, but I think Bonito will be higher on their board. Even if he is a one-trick pony, it's round 3. I like one-trick ponies that could come in and give you some juice where you need some juice in round 3 of the draft.
And he's 22. So he's not the youngest. He's not the springiest of spring chickens or whatever, but he can get better defending the run. He's not even terrible defending the run in terms of productivity. So
let's do it.
If Nick Bonito's there, I draft Nick Bonito. I've loved Nick Bonito since last year. He popped. I was watching somebody on Oklahoma last year in draft prep, and I was like, who the hell is this kid? And it was Nick Bonito.
This is already, so let's take him, right?
Yep.
All right. So this is already our best mock, and we still have 2 rounds to go. We'll discuss who got picked and who the Bengals should pick in rounds 4 and 5. But I have to tell you about Built Bar, because Built Bar is the #1 protein bar on the planet. High in protein, low in sugar, low in calories, perfect for you. They're covered in 100% chocolate. They taste amazing. And you got to check them out if you haven't yet. A lot of our listeners already have. I get DMs all the time. Hey, I'm on the Built Bar plan. And so if you're not, check them out at built.com. See all the different flavors they have. And maybe you want the Built Puffs, where it's protein-infused marshmallow. They taste amazing as well. Look, eating well doesn't have to taste bad. It can taste great. So check out Built Bar right now at built.com. Use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off your order. Again, for 15% off the #1 protein bar on the planet, go to built.com and use promo code LOCK15.
Into day 3 we go on our final mock draft simulator. Having a great time this week.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah, we are,
baby. Do a little dance, Jake. Come on now. Hit it with a little dance here. Oh,
you're doing plenty for both of us.
Address the trenches. Trenches are addressed. All right, what we got?
I'm looking tight end here. I'm looking Alontae Taylor here. There could be a gift in Alontae Taylor. But
let's check tight end first.
Tight end.
And anything stand out to you there?
I think Cole Turner.
Maryland's good. I don't know how to say his name.
This simulator really likes him for sure. Okonkwo. I'm looking Cole Turner here. The Bengals did meet with Grant Calcaterra. He's much lower for us. Cole Turner would be the guy here at tight end. I think this is an appropriate range for him, and I think there is a bit of a fall off after him. So to me, Cole Turner would be the tight end if we were to go tight end here. But in this simulator, it looks like we can get him next round.
Potentially, right? And there's no real wide receiver that I see that makes sense at this stage. Running back, I know you love running backs. No, I'm just kidding. All right, let's switch gears. Let's look at defense. And overall, you're right. I think Alontae Taylor makes some sense. They met with Michael Clemens, but you already addressed edge, so I don't think that's necessarily in the running here. And that's the fun part about what the Bengals have done here in the first 3 rounds. Like Haskell Garrett is a guy they've expressed interest in, at least enough to meet with him. But, Clemens, Garrett, you don't even have to look at him because you've already addressed both of those spots. That doesn't mean you don't take another defensive lineman at some point. But I'm looking at Alontae Taylor. I think really we're down to 2 here. Is it really? I mean, are we down to 2? Do you see anybody else that stands out to you as obvious? Take him.
I think Alex Wright from UAB is another edge rusher that would add juice, but having just taken Nick Bonito in the 3rd round, there isn't really the value meeting up here. Matt Eraza, of course.
I was going to say, is it time to talk about him yet? Is it time to talk about him?
We'll have to dedicate a full episode, I think, to Matt Eraza sometime after the draft and just memorialize the Bengals not picking him.
I also want some Smoke Monday in round 6. Wouldn't be mad at all. It's the best name in the draft, and there are some good ones.
When I learned Smoke Monday's name a couple months ago, I think it was January or February. I was like, man, there's a Smoke Monday in this draft.
This is one that's really unrealistic. I don't think Jimmery
4th round. This would be the back end of the range for him.
Yeah, this would be like his floor. And so here's the thing. You've already taken an offensive lineman, but they met with Sawyer, the kid out of Georgia, interior lineman. You have a conversation. So I think there's three, because I think Sawyer at this point, you're right. This is like the worst case for him. Cole Turner in there. And then the cornerback, Alontae Taylor from Tennessee. So those are the three for me. Is that same for you?
Yeah, and again, if the Bengals, if us as the Bengals in this scenario had not picked Kenyon Green early, Cade Mays from Tennessee, the offensive lineman, also very much in the conversation. Luke Fortner, center from Kentucky, I think very much would be in the conversation here. But having addressed those players or those positions with players earlier in the draft and free agency and last year's draft, two offensive linemen before late day 3 would
Yeah.
surprise me for the Bengals. I might be surprised if they draft 2, period. I'll be
Mm-hmm.
surprised if they draft Kenyon Green in the first round for a couple of reasons, but we're not really looking that hard at offensive line here, in my opinion. And so to me, Alontae Taylor is a pretty good marriage of value and need here and gives you some crazy athleticism, a little bit of positional versatility. Maybe the way he finds his way on the field early in his career is in those 3 safety sets.
Mm-hmm.
And you just look at a tight end, I think, around later if you want to, because every time I pick a tight end early, and we just missed Jelani Woods by 3 picks, by the way.
Yep.
Uh,
I would
I
take him here. If Woods was
oh yeah,
still here, it's the stage where it's like, all right, let's bank on that athleticism. Let's bank on it translating to the field. 136th overall. Let's go.
yeah.
I agree with you though, and I think it is. Again, I try to be realistic, and that's kind of the goal here. I think they want a corner in the first 4 rounds, and so if there's a guy that's clearly better and there is a drop off, then you take him. So let's go with Alontae Taylor and see how things shake out in the final round. We're doing a 5-round mock, and Michael Clemens went off the board. Marcus Jones, the cornerback out of Houston, he's just small, right?
He's a slot corner in the NFL.
And that's the thing, is this simulator doesn't necessarily like him. I don't know if he'll be there at the end of round 4. If he is, I think they'd have a conversation, but he's more of a special teamer because you have a guy named Mike Hilton. So that's tough.
But he's also a playmaker, and he's good
to us here in round 5. Go ahead.
Sorry, on Jones, he's also a playmaker and he's good backup.
Sure.
In the instance that Mike Hilton gets hurt, and it looks like our gamble on tight end paid off.
Yeah, Cole Turner's still there. So there you go. And that's the thing, right? Is they've met with so many guys that are going to go late day 2, early day 3, mid day 3, that I'm sure that they have a bunch that they're like, yeah, is there a real difference between end of round 3 and round 5 like we're in now? And so Cole Turner is available.
Can we look at tight end specifically and see, because I think you and I agree that tight end is something that, I mean, Brian Callahan told us last week they're interested in tight ends in this class.
Well, sure. Yeah. And there doesn't really seem to be anyone else pop off to you here. Bellinger's there, Mitchell.
Well, let's just scroll down to see if there's anybody that they have that's really out of whack with what we have. But no, to me, there's Cole Turner. Okay, you don't have to go further. We're in the 800s here. For those of you not watching on YouTube, Cole Turner is the guy. Daniel Bellinger tested really well. The athleticism doesn't show up on the field quite as much. So that's another guy that you're hoping in a few years can put that together. Or you're hoping, has a breakout like Dawson Knox, where the reason I joked with Joe last week when we were talking tight ends, take Daniel Bellinger in the 5th or 6th round, is because of Dawson Knox. You find a guy that's athletic. Maybe he's not refined. Maybe he's not very productive in college, but sometimes these athletic tight ends hit. Cole Turner, an above average athlete, not a fantastic athlete, but I think shows some good production and is the best of the group here at that position.
And for what it's worth, Matt Eraza went off the board 3 picks ago.
I know,
Smoke
heartbreaking.
Monday off the board 5 picks ago. We'll just kind of look here. There really isn't a ton that stands out that jumps off the page. This one is ridiculous and unrealistic. Josh Paschal still being available here. I would be shocked if he's available in round 5. Kentucky fans know. I think he's a day 2 guy, most likely. So, and we already addressed that spot. And again, we're trying to be realistic. Yeah, I think Cole Turner makes the most sense to me. There's not really a safety that's jumping out. They already addressed corner. And that doesn't mean they won't double dip at corner. But to me, yeah, I think it's Turner. And, maybe they look wide receiver at some point, but no wide receivers jump off. And there was clearly a drop off after day 2, after that 95th pick, going from rounds 3 to 4. All the wide receivers felt like steals were no longer on the board. And that's why that's why I wasn't making the case to pick any of them.
And I think that's what you should expect. I don't necessarily, unless it's overwhelming value, like we were presented with in this scenario, unless Jahan Dotson is there, which he was at 63, and Logan Hall's gone. I mean, if Logan Hall wasn't there, I could have very easily been persuaded to take a wide receiver in that spot. Of course, that's
Yeah,
not how it went. But here, Cole Turner seems
let's
like
do it.
the
Yep.
guy to me, and maybe it's not Cole Turner, maybe it's some other tight end that the Bengals like, but tight end in the 5th round should not surprise you. In summary, Kenyon Green at pick 31 over the likes of Tyler Linderbaum, who I know many of you are going to be hot in the YouTube comments about, and also over a few other players that I think would compete for that spot. Kaiir Elam was available. Devontae Wyatt was available. Arnold Abacadi. A lot of Twitter hype for him on Saturday,
Mhm.
where PFF Austin Gale was posting some Arnold Abacadi stats. And I've seen some people say that he should be a surefire round 1, top 15, even in some cases, pick. And that would surprise me from what I've seen from him. But those are the guys that we selected Kenyon Green over. We talked about the 2nd round pick, Logan Hall, over a bunch of wide receivers that neither James nor I think will necessarily be available at that pick. And if Logan Hall wasn't there, I'll take the abuse. Well, I should say I'll abuse the mock draft simulator in this case and take Jahan Dotson. Nick
It-
Bonito in the 3rd round, getting that pure juice, that pure pass rushing juice edge to help close out games is kind of how I envision his role early in his career. Put Trey Hendrickson, Joseph Osai, and Nick Bonito on the field together with somebody on the interior if you want. Move Sam Hubbard, put him in the A-B gaps, close
Logan
out games
Hall,
with those
bro.
4. Logan Hall, of course, who we just
Yeah.
drafted.
Yep.
I mean,
A-
talk about
And
an impactful pass rushing group in that case.
yeah, I mean that's the thing is you give yourself a ton of juice. You want to talk about that on the defensive line. I love this. Like I said, the top 3 picks are home runs. And then, you go Alante Taylor in round 4 and Cole Turner round 5. They are needs. And at some point you want to address the need, but you want the board to match up with that. And so I think this by far, Jake, is our best mock that we've done over the past 3 weeks. And we've only done 3 of them for what it's worth. But you bolster the offensive line. You add a ton of juice on the defensive line. So now Lou Anarumo, Frank Pollock, Brian Callahan, Marion Hobby, all happy. You still get a corner and you get a tight end that you can develop behind Hayden Hurst because they want Hayden Hurst to have a big year. They signed him for a reason. They're not going to go into the drafting and we have to find a guy who's going to play all the snaps. They want to bolster depth and have a guy they can develop. At the same time, Hurst is the number 1 tight end on this team. So I think we did a good job of marrying needs, wants with talent and the board. And give me this in less than 2 weeks. That'd be pretty good.
Yeah, I think the challenges here, no developmental wide receiver or rotational wide receiver, and the Bengals have clearly expressed some interest in that position, but I think that's later on day 3. And so trying to stay true to something that they might do, this could look a lot like what they do, except again, I think Kenyon Green, I don't know. I think that the Bengals would probably pick Kaiir Elam in that spot
Do you
where we
really?
pick Kenyon Green.
It's close. I could see them doing it. I think they would probably take Green though. I think he's
It'll
going to be
be
higher on their board.
It'll be interesting. We'll see if the Bengals get to have that debate and we get to have that debate in just over a week. And tomorrow, like I said, Dane Brugler, we can talk to him about it. For Dane,
Yeah.
Logan Hall 37, Kenyon Green 27. Dane not as high as on Kaiir Elam. He has him as his 45th ranked player. But we'll talk to Dane Brugler about a bunch of players and the strengths of this draft and how it all lines up for the Bengals. That'll be coming up. We'll do some deep dives with Mike Bengal Sands. We'll talk to Joe, get his takes as we're loading up again on a bunch of draft content ahead of next week's 2022 NFL draft. Until next time, Bengals fans, hoo day and have a good one.